everyone, my name is Vina, aka Miss WOCReader, and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about overconsumption in the book community. The reason why it's on my mind lately is because just this past week I saw so many people online encouraging people to overconsume books. They said, go buy as many books as you want. They were literally using the word overconsume. And that was so interesting to me because the way in which we talk about overconsumption in the book community is very different than the way I see overconsumption discussed in other communities. Like when it comes to things like makeup or plushies, we understand perfectly well why it's wrong to overconsume those things, how all of that leads to waste. Like when it comes to like mass clothing hauls, everybody is on their ethical kick right now, and it's just like, no, you can thrift clothing, but when it comes to books, it's like people's opinion immediately changes, and it's go ahead and consume whatever you want as much as you want, whether you're going to read those books or not. And then I started doing a little bit of research around the topic just to get some more information on what people were saying, and I came across a Substack post about overconsumption from around the time when people were comparing the book community to the fashion community and talking about fast fashion, and it was very eye-opening because we talk all the time about how people who read books are inherently smarter. That is one of the key talking points. Like, it's okay to overconsume books because reading books makes you smarter. But reading that Substack, I feel like there was just a lot that this reader did not comprehend, and I wanted to discuss some of those points. So the argument is that it's not the same as fast fashion, despite us seeing people do like mass Shein hauls or Temu hauls or like running to TJ Maxx and Marshalls every week. That is bad, but books cannot possibly be any similar because, in this person's opinion, people aren't throwing away their books at the same rates, which I would have to see the data for that, to be honest. I know people do tend to hold on to books for a long time, even when they're not actively reading them. But she argues that throwing away books is like practically a sin. Not for your average everyday person. It's a sin in the online book community, but I see books being thrown out all the time, especially since like little free libraries have grown in popularity. A lot of people have used those as their dumping ground to offload all the old books in their house once they're cleaning up. And there's an argument that, oh well, the books aren't sitting in landfills like the clothes. Yes, they are. So lumber is not an unlimited resource. Like, we are definitely aiding in deforestation to a certain extent with all the printings for books. And when it comes to getting rid of these books, they cannot be recycled. The glue that is used to bind the books is not recyclable, so these books do end up in landfills, whether you give them away to your Goodwill or to a local used bookstore or feel like you sold them off. A lot of these books cannot really be sold off. Books have a very, very low resale value. And after a while, they can't just sit in a library. They can't just sit in like an old stock room. They can't just sit in like a warehouse. They have to be discarded. And I'm somebody who shops at discount retailers where they receive a portion of books that are just from like different larger retailers getting rid of their stock. They buy them at a and sell them at a discount. Even then, like the past few years, like there's been library books that have slipped through the cracks and stuff from what they bought, but like if the books still aren't selling, they have to go somewhere, and that somewhere has to be the trash. Like, you can't just keep reselling books or donating them till the end of time. Eventually, they are going to end up in the trash. This person also talked about the cheap labor involved in fast fashion and how they often are paying people overseas in factories with harsh working conditions to make the clothes, and how that can't possibly be the same when it comes to books because people often strike for better working conditions. Yeah, the people in the office strike for better working conditions, which is the same case in the fashion industry. You have people fighting for better working conditions who are in the office, but a lot of these books are printed and bound overseas as well. Do you think that the book making factories are suddenly like paying much better and have better working conditions than the ones that make clothes or any other type of product that you consume? Like, let's think about it for real. At the end of the day, there are still people working in the factories, regardless of what product that they're making, who aren't making a fair wage, who feel like they have to do this job because they don't have many other options. So I would tread lightly and do a little bit more research before making a declaration that the working conditions are so much better in publishing, when you're only speaking from the perspective of the people who are on one side of it. We're not talking about the manufacturing perspective, which when we are talking about fast fashion, we tend to focus on the manufacturing perspective. I also think there is an aspect of information overload, and you can, to an extent, read too much and not really be taking everything in. That's something that I've actually thought a lot about this year. My reading is not the same where it's been like the past few years. Like, if you look at even just my blog, which I moved over to Substack recently, subscribe if you're not already, but I had a lot more posts in 2020 because reading was my escape. I was like working like a drone, just like working all day, very hard, very mentally draining, and then outside of that, I wasn't watching TV. I was just reading books. I discovered like friends on BookTube, so I was hanging with them. I was just consuming so much. I was writing reviews all the time. My reviews have actually gotten less and less every single year as I do read more books. And like, you can just see how things change just following along with that, because you get to a point where you read so many books that you go back to a book that you might have read a few months ago or maybe last year, and it's like, what really happened in that book? Because everything cannot stick in your brain. Everything does not stand out to you. And I think about like pre-2020, I maybe read 20 books a year. I have to go back and check my Goodreads, but I wasn't reading I was reading books consistently, but I wasn't reading books every single week. It might have taken me a couple of weeks to finish a book. I was borrowing the library a little bit, but I was also just reading what I got on NetGalley. Right now, I would say my reading is more of a balance of reading a lot of books from the library, but also I get sent a lot of books. And we don't talk about like getting sent a lot of books enough. As a book influencer, I am constantly reaching out to publishers. As somebody who advocates for reading Black books specifically, there are a lot of books that fall below the cracks that the publisher just really does not market. So I will reach out to a publisher and be like, I'm going to post on this book. Can I have this book? And they'll send me an ARC or they'll send me a finished copy. And I try to make it pretty clear on this channel that I do get a lot of finished copies, but sometimes I don't always remember to cite them all. It's something that I constantly have to work on, because if I got the book free like the physical book free from the publisher, but then I ended up reading it through the library. Like, 'cause sometimes I like to read in different formats. If I don't feel like physically reading the book, I will borrow the ebook or the audiobook from the library and read it that way. In my mind, like, I forget, oh yeah, I got this from the publisher. I need to state that because I read it by borrowing it from my library. And I am so grateful for having access to 4 different libraries, because that makes my options a lot wider and makes it easier to get the things in that I want to read. But those of us who frequently use our libraries know that there's times in the months where it feels just like all your holds came in at once. And so it's like you're scrambling because you're like, okay, all these books came in. I want to read this one. I want to read that one. And I need to meet these deadlines, because the thing about having different libraries too is that they also have different checkout periods. So this one might be 14 days checkout while this one is 21. So then I'm like trying to prioritize based on what came in first. And then I also have ARCs, and then I have things on Hoopla that I want to get to. And all of that can be overwhelming. You get like some information overload because you're reading so much, especially if you're reading large books, which we've talked about how books are so long nowadays. And as somebody who reads a lot of fantasy, there's like, you get a lot of different world building and characters and stuff to consume. And then like sometimes I'll switch to nonfiction because I'm trying to sprinkle that in every so often, and I feel like that requires more concentration because you're really getting hit with information there coming from various sources. Like, did I really consume that book to the best of my ability, or was I just trying to read to get it over with and move on to the next one? Did I really get to sit and process some of the information that was being given to me? As far as reading making you inherently smarter, I don't think so, because we're not necessarily reading for knowledge all the time. So to see that argument is always funny, because it comes under the assumption that everybody's just reading nonfiction, because that's where you would be really learning. You can learn some things from a fantasy or a romance, but that's not the goals of those books. They're not there to teach you things, and things aren't always framed in a real life way to teach you. Like, you can read a contemporary book where they might talk about a certain issue, but that's just a starting point. They don't always necessarily go into depth about that issue the way you would need them to go into depth. And so when you're just learning from a starting point, you're not getting everything that you need to get. You're not having those deeper conversations. And I'm seeing that a lot just this past year, because we talk about reading makes you inherently smarter. Okay, look who is the president of the US. Look at the world overall right now, and how so many of these leaders are more conservative, how there's a lot of fear mongering, how there's a lot of warmongering, because it's not just the US, it's a lot of places too. But we're all reading, right? So the world should be better. But yet, even the readers are still engaging in problematic things. Like, even the readers, we're seeing certain things trending in books that are like the opposite of what people are preaching from reading all these books. Like, I enjoy romance, but romance is right now leaning more conservative. Even though we have a lot of dark romance and smut at the forefront, there's still that little bit of conservatism coming through. There's a lot more focus on the men and their pleasure versus just but it's like framed as like the women's pleasure. Like, there's a lot of stuff right now that I'm seeing in mainstream romance that I've been seeing in porn for years. And when it comes to porn, people would argue that these things are bad, and some of it might even be a little taboo. But now that it's in romance written by women, it's like, even though it's being written exactly the same, it's framed as empowerment, it's framed as feminism, and I don't feel like we're really having that conversation. I mean, I'm seeing sprinkles of it here and there on Threads, but that's really not a good place to have a conversation. And I would actually love to see people discuss more about it, because I feel like we're seeing a trend towards certain thoughts and emotions in this community, and they're getting some of their opinion directly from the books that they consume. Like, we all love like a morally gray, like, villain type love interest. That's what people were saying, at least when they were making excuses for voting for Trump. They're like, well, he's a bad guy and we love the bad guys. There's also a bit of a financial burden when it comes to buying so many books. And I've seen many people fall into this trap where they're complaining about all their debt, but at the same time, we're seeing them haul hundreds of books a year. And I think some people have gotten a little bit better at it when it comes to just borrowing from their library, but a lot of times, especially when it comes to newer anticipated releases, people don't want to wait. So they're like, waiting. When I see 100 people waiting for that ebook, I'm just going to buy it instead. And the cost of books are increasing. Like, you can easily spend $30 on a hardcover now. And then that's not even getting into, well, now we're doing special editions, and there's this need to have this book that looks extra pretty because everybody else is talking about it, even though you haven't read it yet. And that's kind of one of the things I hate about the special edition craze right now, is that the books are costing more. You usually have to get them before you actually read the book because they're not really offering them down the line. So again, books have low resale value. You go and spend $42 on that special edition, and then you don't like the book, you can try and sell it on Pango, but you're not going to make the same amount of money back that you spent for it. And then it feels like you took a loss there. Often with buying books, you are taking a loss. I try to buy a lot at discount for that reason, and I don't really pre-order new releases anymore. I would just rather ask the library to pre-order them so I can read it and get a feel before I buy a copy that I want to add to my shelf, because you might not think that $18 here, $30 here is a lot, but unless you're like, that's like one whole hour of work most of the time to be able to afford a book. And we're seeing costs increase across the board for various things. So like, I went to the grocery store yesterday and easily spent $100 just at one place, and I had to go to multiple places. And it's not like I was even getting big items. I wasn't buying a lot of meat. I didn't buy any seafood. I really just bought the basics, didn't really buy too many snacks and stuff. And that was at the discount grocery, so I can only just imagine at the regular grocery it's worse. We're seeing people being laid off across the board in like just various industries. There's the government shutdown going on that's affecting people. So it's becoming harder and harder to live, and harder to be able to spend money on books, which are just like a hobby, they're a pastime. And a lot of people, they do come into a new hobby and they feel like, oh my gosh, I have to buy all the things. We see that all the time, especially with the rise of TikTok. We've seen people easily drop $800 to get into coloring, which should be a simple activity. You should be able to just buy a cheap coloring book and some markers or some crayons or some colored pencils and just start. But we're seeing people spend hundreds of dollars before they even start coloring on a book because they feel like, I have to have the latest this and I have to have the latest that. And I feel like that's the same way people are when it comes to books to an extent. They're like, well, I have to have this popular book and I have to have this book everybody's rushing to talk about. This book is causing drama right now, so I have to go read it and see for myself, and the library is taking too long, so let me go out and run quick and buy it so I can make some content, or so I can be a part of the discussion. recently too, and I touched on it a little bit on Instagram, when it comes to Heritage Months, that's when a lot of authors see a boost in their sales, or at least they used to. Those boosts aren't happening like before, and I was seeing during Latinx History Month that there were authors and book influencers alike talking about, why aren't the sales going up? Why aren't people buying all these books? And I'm just like, well, the world is on fire, but also here in the US, the Latinx community just has more important things to worry about than reading for fun. Like, so I'm not sure if some of the posts were directed at white people being guilty in buying those books to make themselves feel better, which we shouldn't rely on white people guilt in order to increase sales, because that's not genuine and it does always fall off. But if you are just trying to survive between rising costs of everything, and on top of that, you might be laying low because you have to deal with Ace knocking down your door. You're not trying to go out and do all these events or buy all these things. You have to kind of shift your priorities around. And what I found that, like with the Heritage Month, I was noticing it was becoming a time when it's like, okay, I want to prove that I read diversely. I want to prove that I'm a good person. I'm just going to go ahead and buy a bunch of these books, and I'm going to mention them. I'm going to post them online, and I'm never going to read them again. And I was noticing there was also a disconnect from people claiming they're reading these books, but then it feels like they still don't understand anything about these groups in real life. Like, they can understand the fictional people on the page, but when it comes to the real people, they weren't understanding what they were going through. It's like they weren't actually like consuming anything about the culture, because it's not the same as interacting with the real life people. You won't really know about a group until you're listening to actual representatives from that group and getting various opinions and not just taking it from one fictional source. And then in publishing, they do like things to be pretty and whitewashed and fit in a neat little package. So conversations can often start in books, but we're getting a very watered down version of that conversation, not too controversial, because they don't want to upset whoever they think that they are going to upset. And so I don't always find that fiction is the best place to get your information from. I do like books. I know nonfiction can be a struggle, like even for myself, sometimes nonfiction can be a struggle, so I'll read articles, I'll watch documentaries, and I feel like that's a better way to get informed about various topics. Something I had to really sit with is over consuming books as a way to avoid reality. People often talk about books save my life, books are my escape. Books were my escape until they weren't. And I really had to deal with that in 2023 when my life was just on fire, because it got to the point where I'm crying every day and I want to escape into a book, but like my mind cannot focus on a book. I just want to sit and stare at the wall. I want to listen to music. I want to watch mindless videos. I have all these racing thoughts all the time about my situation. And it was really hard to just dive into a book. I had to actually deal with my feelings. Like, my father had passed away and I lost my job shortly after. And while I was still reading, I can honestly say the books that I read during the month of October 2023, I can't really tell you what happened in those books. I don't feel like I really consumed those books and got a lot out of them because I was too far into my grief. Like, I was reading stuff on the page, but nothing was really sinking in. So I just usually don't even speak on the books that I read during that time because it's like I wasn't really reading them. That's not where my main focus was. And trying to find that escape was difficult. I ended up just having to actually talk about my feelings and acknowledge the frustration that was going on. And I am grateful that this community, like the book community, did connect me to so many people who I can consider a friend, who I was able to vent to, who I was able to talk to, who just were able to take my mind off my situation for a little while also like being able to identify with the same issues. So I think that yes, escapism is great, and reading definitely helped me, like, to a certain point, escape a lot of my issues between 2020 and early 2023, but you do have to end up facing your actual issues and stop just trying to, like, bury them under fictional stories and words on a page. I think that we can more easily see how people are trying to run from their problems when it comes to them shopping and just buying a bunch of clothes. But when it comes to books, we don't see it the same way. And overall, as with anything, you should have balance. Too much sex is bad, too much alcohol is bad, too much gambling is bad, too much shopping is bad, but it can be great with moderation. And so, yes, over consuming books is bad. But that doesn't mean you can't consume books at all. It just means that sometimes we do kind of need to have these discussions on the healthy way to do it. And we're at a time where we really need to focus on the community outside of just the readers, because it's the people who aren't the readers who are the most vulnerable and need the most help. Let me know what your thoughts are on bookish overconsumption in the comments section down below. And if you like this video, make sure and hit that like button. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!